My ex-husband called asking me to donate my kidney to save his pregnant wife, the woman he cheated with. When I met him at a diner, he grabbed my wrist and said, "You owe us this." That's when I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer right there at the table. See, Brian had no idea what I'd become in the 6 years since he destroyed our marriage. He still saw me as the broken teacher he'd left behind, not the strategic financial advisor who'd rebuilt her entire life from scratch. While he was busy playing house with his 23-year-old assistant Stephanie, I'd earned my financial planning certification, built a client base worth over $2 million in managed assets, and married Robert, a corporate attorney who specialized in medical liability cases. Brian looked shocked when I said lawyer into the phone. "David, it's about that kidney donation situation I mentioned. Can you conference in Patricia?" Within seconds, I had both my attorney and my physician sister on speakerphone right there in that greasy diner booth. "Brian thinks I owe him my kidney because his wife is dying," I explained calmly to my legal team. "The same wife he was sleeping with for 2 years during our marriage." David's voice came through crystal clear. "Any documented communication about this request?" I scrolled through my phone. 14 text messages with photos of her in the hospital, 3 voicemails begging me to do the right thing, and 1 very interesting message from his attorney yesterday threatening to make this public if I don't cooperate. Patricia, my sister, jumped in with her medical expertise. "Kidney donation is completely voluntary. Any coercion or threats could constitute harassment. Are you recording this conversation?" "Started recording the moment he grabbed my wrist," I replied, watching Brian's face turn pale, which, by the way, could be considered assault. That's when Brian realized he'd severely miscalculated who he was dealing with. You see, the divorce 6 years ago had been brutal, but it taught me exactly how predators like Brian operated. He'd tried to claim half my teaching pension despite making 3 times my salary as a pharmaceutical executive. He drained our joint accounts to buy Stephanie jewelry while I was planning our anniversary trip to Italy. The humiliation of discovering their affair through a misdirected text from his phone was nothing compared to watching them get married in our church just 2 months after our divorce finalized. But Brian's biggest mistake was underestimating my capacity for strategic thinking. While he saw a broken woman licking her wounds, I was systematically rebuilding myself into someone he couldn't touch. The financial planning certification wasn't just career advancement, it was warfare preparation. I learned how to investigate assets, trace financial patterns, and most importantly, how to leverage professional networks for maximum impact. My client base included 3 family law attorneys, 2 medical malpractice specialists, and the chief financial officer of Brian's pharmaceutical company. Robert wasn't just my husband, he was my strategic partner. During our courtship, I'd been completely transparent about my history with Brian and my determination to never be vulnerable again. Robert had actually helped me research Brian's company structure, his professional licensing requirements, and the ethical obligations of pharmaceutical executives. "Here's what's going to happen," I told Brian, ending the conference call but keeping my phone recording. "You're going to leave this diner, drive home, and never contact me again about this kidney situation. Because if you don't, I'm going to make some very interesting phone calls." Brian leaned forward aggressively. "You can't threaten us. Stephanie is dying." "I'm not threatening anyone," I replied calmly. "I'm simply explaining consequences. For instance, did you know that your pharmaceutical company has very strict ethical guidelines about executives involved in medical coercion cases? My client Helen Blackwood sits on your board of directors. We had lunch last week." His face went white. Helen Blackwood was the iron-fisted board member who'd fired 2 executives last year for ethical violations. "Then there's the matter of your attorney's threats yesterday," I continued. "Gavin Crawford, right? Interesting choice, considering he's currently under investigation by the state bar for client intimidation tactics. My husband has already filed a complaint about his call to me." I pulled out a folder I'd prepared before this meeting. But my favorite part is this financial analysis I ran on your household expenses. Stephanie's medical bills, your mortgage payments, the private school costs for when your baby arrives, all very manageable on your current salary. Unless, of course, you face a professional ethics investigation that puts your pharmaceutical license at risk. Brian's hands were shaking. You're bluffing. Am I? Let me read you yesterday's email from Dr. Elizabeth Hayes at State Medical Licensing. I scrolled through my phone. Investigation opened into potential medical coercion involving pharmaceutical executive Brian Mitchell. Subject appears to be using professional contacts to pressure ex-wife into organ donation through attorney threats and harassment. The blood drained from his face completely. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes was infamous for ending careers over ethical violations. Here's what you didn't know about me, Brian, I said, leaning back comfortably. When you destroyed our marriage, you created someone who would never be vulnerable again. I spent 6 years learning exactly how to protect myself from people like you. I opened my financial planning portfolio on my tablet. I manage $2.3 million in client assets. My professional network includes attorneys, doctors, corporate executives, and medical licensing board members. My husband specializes in medical liability cases and knows every ethics investigator in the state. Brian was starting to understand the chess match he'd walked into, but I wasn't finished. The harassment campaign stops now, I continued. No more texts, no more photos of Stephanie, no more lawyer threats, because every single communication you've sent me has been forwarded to a very specific group of people who have the power to end your career. I showed him my phone screen displaying a group text chain. Helen Blackwood from your board, Dr. Elizabeth Hayes from Medical Licensing, Dr. Jennifer Stone, who heads the Organ Donation Ethics Committee at the hospital, and Michael Foster, who handles pharmaceutical industry compliance cases. They're all very interested in this situation. Brian finally found his voice. But Stephanie will die without a kidney. Maybe, I replied coldly, but that's not my problem to solve. You see, I did some research on Stephanie's condition, genetic kidney failure with a viable pregnancy. There are exactly 17 potential donors in the National Registry who match her blood type. 3 of them are already in preliminary screening. His mouth fell open. How do you know that? Because Dr. Stone runs the organ donation program, and she was very helpful when I explained how you were trying to coerce me into surgery through professional and personal threats. She confirmed that Stephanie has multiple options. You just wanted the fastest, most convenient solution. I gathered my materials and stood up. So here's your choice, Brian. Walk away now and let the medical professionals handle your wife's care through proper channels. Or keep harassing me and watch your pharmaceutical career disappear in an ethics investigation that will ensure you can never afford Stephanie's medical bills anyway. Brian grabbed my wrist again, just like in the beginning. Please, just think about it. She's pregnant. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back at his face. David? Yes, he just grabbed me again. Physical contact clearly recorded. Add simple assault to the harassment complaint. Brian released me immediately. Oh, and Brian? I smiled coldly. That pregnancy you keep mentioning, I had lunch yesterday with Dr. Rebecca Torres, the high-risk pregnancy specialist at Presbyterian Hospital. Stephanie's medical records show a completely normal pregnancy with standard kidney function support options. The baby was never at risk from waiting for a proper donor match. His face crumpled as he realized I'd systematically dismantled every manipulation tactic he'd tried to use. You used my infertility and miscarriage history as weapons, I continued. You tried to make me feel responsible for an innocent baby's death. But I did my homework, Brian. I always do my homework now. I walked toward the exit, then turned back. The proper donors will be ready in 3 to 4 weeks. Stephanie will get her kidney from someone who volunteered freely, without coercion or harassment. And you'll pay for it with your pharmaceutical executive salary, assuming you still have one after the ethics investigations conclude. 2 weeks later, Robert and I were having dinner when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Benjamin Rogers, Stephanie's father, with a simple message. Donor match found through registry. Surgery scheduled next week. Thank you for your consideration. I showed Robert the message. Interesting that they found someone so quickly once the harassment stopped and they started working through proper channels. Robert raised his wine glass. To strategic superiority and never being the victim twice. The ethics investigations took another month to conclude. Brian received formal censure from the Pharmaceutical Licensing Board and a written reprimand from his company's board of directors. Gavin Crawford's law license was suspended for 6 months for client intimidation tactics. Most importantly, the medical community now had documented evidence of attempted donor coercion, which would protect other potential donors from similar harassment. Stephanie's surgery was successful. The baby was born healthy 4 months later, and I never heard from Brian again. 6 months after the diner confrontation, I was keynote speaker at the National Financial Planners Conference, discussing strategic life planning after major life disruptions. My practice had grown to over $4 million in managed assets, and I'd been invited to join 2 professional boards focused on ethics in financial services. During my presentation, I made a point that had become central to my philosophy. The best defense against people who want to exploit your vulnerabilities is to systematically eliminate those vulnerabilities through professional competence, strategic networks, and documented accountability. After the presentation, a young woman approached me, recently divorced, devastated by her ex-husband's betrayal, unsure how to rebuild. I gave her my card and scheduled a consultation, because I'd learned that the most satisfying revenge against people who underestimate you is becoming someone they could never touch again. Robert found me that evening on our back porch, looking out at the ocean. Thinking about Brian? He asked. Actually, no, I replied. Thinking about how grateful I am that he forced me to become this person. Someone with real power, real protection, real strategic advantage. He squeezed my hand. Someone who saves her kidney for people who deserve it. I laughed. Someone who knows the difference between generosity and manipulation. A year later, I received a wedding invitation from one of the kidney donors in the registry who'd ended up helping someone else after Stephanie's surgery was complete. She'd met her husband through the donation experience and wanted to thank me for the referral to Dr. Stone's program, which had led to her becoming a donation advocate. That's when I fully understood the power shift that had occurred. Brian had tried to use my compassion as a weakness to exploit. Instead, he'd forced me to develop systems that protected both my resources and my ability to help others on my own terms. The woman I'd become, financially secure, professionally respected, strategically protected, could donate kidneys or money or time to causes I chose without fear of manipulation or coercion. That was real power. Brian had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Never let someone else's emergency become your crisis. Build yourself into someone who helps from strength, not from vulnerability. And in the end, everyone got what they deserved.